Hey everyone, I wanted to make a quick guide on how to play black-green in Bloomburrow draft. I played it a bunch on my way up to Mythic. I think it's very powerful and it's pretty easy to draft consistently. So why would you play black-green? Well, maybe you get a strong rare that's specifically black-green focused. Carmella the Seed Miser, Yagra the Eater of All, Season of Loss, a very powerful card in any color combination, but specifically does well in black-green, probably because the mill allows the final mode to be a very high damage spell a lot of the time. Something like Innkeeper's Talent is very good in black green, but could go into other green decks as well. So if you pick that, you might want to stay open, but then if you see some nice black cards, you might end up into black green. And if you see some later uncommons, later in the pack. Now I'm perfectly happy first picking something like a Hunter's Talent or Wix Patrol, even a Vine Reap Mentor or Feed the Cycle. If you see Vine Reap Mentor's fifth or sixth pick, if you start seeing Wix Patrol later in the pack, you start moving to those colors, you might end up in black green. But feel free to play something like Wix Patrol or Hunter's Talent, or even Feed the Cycle in any deck, any black green deck, any deck that can fit the colors. Don't feel like you have to be pigeonholed into black green unless you're getting cards in both colors. So, one of the important things to understand about this deck, the black green deck, is that even though the theme is food and squirrels, the deck is not about food and squirrels. Something like Treetop Sentry, Corpse Ray Cultivator, those are perfectly fine cards, but they're just filler. Don't pick these highly, don't pick these over more powerful cards that seem less synergistic. Something like Osteomanter's Adept is a very strong card. You're perfectly fine picking this early, first picking it even. But if you pick Osteomantis Adept, you don't have to go black-green just because it says Squirrel on it. You can go any black deck out of it, or you can obviously pivot off of it. But even though it says it seems to be in the Squirrel archetype, there really is no Squirrel archetype. There's black-green, and it gets some benefits from some synergies using food and squirrels, but ultimately you're playing around the power, not the synergies. And interestingly, Curious Forger, which is the uncommon that is a squirrel and has the forage mechanic, returns a permanent. Before the set, I would say I thought this was a great card. It turns out it's actually just filler. So don't draft any of these Tree Sub-Sentries, Corpse Bay Cultivator, Curious Forager. Highly look for the power cards. If the synergy comes, that's great. So why is Black Green good? Well, I think the main reasons are it has great value creatures and it has great removal. So value creatures like Downwind Ambusher, Tree God Duo, Vine Reap Mentor, Thoughtstalker Warlock. Now the monocolored of these cards can go into any deck, but obviously if you have both black and green ones, they fit together great. And one of the things you try to do is you trade off with a bunch of creatures and you keep slamming things for incremental value, and then you use your removal in situations to disrupt the opposing synergy. Now, this set is actually pretty bad for most removal. Red got some pretty bad removal. White didn't get anything great. It has the Sonar strike, but Black got Savor, it got Fell, it got Nocturnal Hunger, it got Feed the Cycle. Green got Hunter's Talent, it got Longstock Brawl. We also have Wix Patrol, which is both a value creature and removal, as is Downwind Ambusher will hit a surprising amount of targets. Specifically, Fireglass Mentor is a great to pick off, even a Pawn Prophet, so they can't get those synergies. You have a lot of ways to disrupt the more synergistic decks with your power and your value. So, and obviously Hunter's Talent is removal and its value later on as you have the mana to level that up. So what are the key cards? Most of the ones we've been talking about. Vine Reap Mentor, Hunter's Talent, Feed the Cycle, Wix Patrol, Fell. All great uncommons. If you start getting a bunch of these, you might go into this deck. Fell, 2 mana. Fell and Feed the Cycle, both 2 mana removal. Feed the Cycle is better in this deck because you can use the Forage to make it 2 mana. It's actually a little bit worse if you have to pay for 3 mana. Wix Patrol, incredible value. You do actually sometimes have to be careful of milling yourself. For commons, Savor, incredibly good removal, as is Nocturnal Hunger. Cash Grab is very good. You can get a little extra value if you have a Squirrel, but you really don't need to. Feel free to use it just to pick up lands, and it mills some cards in the graveyard for your foraging if you have that. Baker's Bane Duo is sort of like a budget Vine Reap Mentor, and Tree God Duo, like we've talked about, this card has been such an overperformer. You'll notice it's not a squirrel, right? It's actually the other creature types in green. It's sort of meant for the rabbits or the frogs deck, but it's such a powerful card. It works perfectly well here. It helps you on offense and defense. Great card. Black and green are just high power level cards, so these are the type of cards you want to play rather than just the squirrel synergies. Now you have things like Honored Rayleigh to Bushy Bodyguard, right? Those trigger off squirrels, those trigger off food. Absolutely fine to play the synergies. Same with Bone Cash Overseer. But ultimately, what you want is things like all these cards, right? Longstalk Brawl, Consumed by Greed, Polywop, great removal. Downwind Ambusher, Daggerfang Duo, High Spine Wolverine. Those are just great ETBs, value creatures. Tree God Duo, like we talked about. Hazel's Nocturne, I love. Instant speed, the life drain is amazing. The getting two, it's a 2-for-1. It helps you pick stuff out. It's very good if you have good low drops to get back, so you can deploy something to the board the turn you play it, so you don't lose too much board position on the turns you play it. And something like Moonstone Harbinger, I think, is a great example of what we're talking about in this set. It's meant for a bat deck, right? It was clearly seeded for the bat deck. It has a bat ability, life gain ability. It's amazing in this deck. It's just a great creature, shuts down opposing offenses. You can get some damage in later. You can gain some life through food, but you'd rather have something like that over the Corpseberry Cultivator, even though that seems way more on theme. Draft the power, don't worry about the synergies. The other day I said people shouldn't splash. It turns out in this deck specifically, splashing seems to work okay in certain situations, specifically with blue. Drew Dream and Trancer, Render Relentless, Lily Splash Mentor, and Glob all have pretty good stats. So it seems like there's a lot of internal synergies between the milling and the threshold abilities of the blue-black cards. So you have some incentives to pick cards of both. I wouldn't splash too much. Try to make sure your fixing's okay. There really isn't a lot in this set. 3-Tree Mascot actually has surprisingly good stats, specifically in this deck, so it's something to look out for if you pick up some of these other, rares and uncommons worth splashing. So I would say avoid splashing if you can, but if you happen to get a very powerful rare like one of these, maybe take a look at it, specifically into blue. So, final thoughts, play good cards, don't play the bad cards. Don't worry about the synergies, don't worry about the squirrels. We're not here for that. We're here for the raw power level. We're here for the removal. We're here for the value creatures. You need defensive speed. There's a lot of great fast decks in this format. There's red-white. There's red-green can come out pretty fast. There's black-red. A lot of the red decks come out pretty fast. And you want to be able to trade off with their early creatures, remove the things that are fueling their synergies with your efficient removal, and then overwhelm them with your value later in the game. The way you get run over is the way you get beat is if they have something like a Fireglass Mentor in play, you need to be able to kill that. And that's what Downwind Ambush is for. That's what Savers for, right? Other colors don't have that type of efficient removal, so something like Fireglass Mentor is just going to bury them in cards, but we don't have that problem with this deck. Make sure your 2-drops are real 2-drops. A lot of times we look at our curve and we see the huge spike on 2 and we think, okay, I'm all set on 2, I don't need to pick more. But what you want are things like Vine Reap Mentor and Baker's Bane Duo. You want creatures that come down and trade off, or come down and apply some pressure and make your opponents get in certain situations where they need to respond to you. What you don't necessarily want, or what you don't want to count as 2-drops, are things like Cash Grab, things like maybe a Pawn Profit, which isn't affecting the board, things like Saver, which you can use on 2, but it's hard to be super proactive, and sometimes it's not going to thread in. You're not going to be able to develop to the board. You're going to just have, a naked board till turn 3 or 4 sometimes. So while you do want to draft all those cards, you also want to make sure you have actual 2-drop creatures that can come down and trade with your opponent's creatures and affect the board in that way. Black-green is great removal. Make sure you utilize that. That's a big reason to be in this deck, is you can actually remove your opponent's creatures, and you can try to value through, if you leave them with only one part of the synergy, you can value through the rest. You have very strong rares and mythics. If you start getting those, build a little value removal engine around them, and see if you can draw into your mythic every game. And you can splash blue or pivot into blue. All the Sultai colors seem to work well together, so if you start drafting black-green, you might be able to pivot into a blue-green, or black-blue, or green-black. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful. That was about 10 minutes. I might try to keep making guides like this if it helps. Let me know if you like it. Thank you.